The candidates tournament starts on Sunday the 29th of March in Cyprus, and I'm concluding my preview of the tournament by looking at the player with the highest rating, Hikaru Nakamura. Nakamura is perhaps the most polarising of the 8 participants. First off, we should look at how he qualified, and that is the controversial part. So Nakamura sits comfortably at number 2 in the world on the FIDE classical list, with a rating of 28.10. At 38 years of age, he's been one of the leading players in the world for, well, almost 2 decades. But this is a legacy rating, built on the solid foundations of his results in classical games from long ago. Over the past few years, triggered by the pandemic, he's become a highly successful streamer, playing regular online sessions on chess.com and building up a massive worldwide following. If he ventures away from his home studio, then it's to play in high-profile blitz and rapid events like the esports final and freestyle events and stuff that chess.com put on. From a purely monetary viewpoint, he has no need to play in classical tournaments. After all, classical tournaments involved a lot of time and an enormous amount of stress, and when the rewards as a successful streamer are so great, well, what's the point? But with Magnus Carlsen retired from the Classical World Championship and Gukesh, the world champion, struggling to find form, perhaps Nakamura reckons this is his best chance to become world champion. At 38 years old and now married with a child, this could be his last chance to play for the ultimate crown. So Hikaru decided to go for the candidates, and he did so in a very pragmatic way by avoiding top-level classical chess. There was one spot in the candidates for the player with the highest average rating in the period August 2025 to January 2026. And with his rating well over 2800, Nakamura had a head start on the competition. But there was just one snag. To avoid inactive players claiming the spot, FIDE rules stipulated that a player had to play 40 rated classical games from February 2025 to January 2026. And Nakamura had only played 18. Solution? In the autumn, he went on tour across North America, participating in small open tournaments to play the required 22 rated games. So long as he avoided disaster, he would be able to maintain his dominant rating and qualify. In between his other commitments, Nakamura played in the Louisiana State Championship, the Iowa Open, the Summerside Maritime Open in Canada, and finally the Washington Dulles Open, where he completed his mission. Of the 22 rated games, Nakamura scored an outstanding 20 wins and 2 draws against opposition with an average rating of 2090. Now you might think, well, they're rated way below him, but actually, given that the schedule for these events was really tight, they're mainly double and even triple round days, played in very, well, normal, average venues and against unfamiliar opposition, I think that's a really, really good result. While some castigated Nakamura for exploiting the rules, his backdoor route to the candidates had the unintended consequence of delighting chess fans. Participants in the tournaments were thrilled to see a world-class player at close quarters, and some even had the chance of playing against him. For Hikaru, it was clearly a buzz as well. So here's one of his tweets. He said, "Honorary 2025 Louisiana State Chess Champion. Jokes aside, tournaments with players of all ages and backgrounds 2 to 3 games a day, and the typical rush to get food between games really reminds me of why I fell in love with chess all those decades ago. Well, it's a really nice message actually from him on Twitter, or X as I should say. So Nakamura achieved his goal, and at the same time he could not have constructed a better piece of PR. I've already shown one of Nakamura's wins from these tournaments on the channel. I'll put the link up there. It's a really nice Rossolimo with black. And here's another game that he played in the second tournament of his tour. It's a routine win, it's short and sweet, but it shows Nakamura's very practical nature and ability to pounce on a mistake. Hikaru is deadly with the initiative. His opponent is 21 years old and has an ELO of 1922. Played in round 1 of the Iowa Open. This is Hikaru Nakamura playing white against Benjamin Dar. As you can see, he's rated 1915, and apparently he's 21 years old. So here we go. So bishop g5 and knight f6. So we've transposed into a Trompovsky opening. And I always think that's a bit of a slice serve opening with white. It's tricky, basically. Well, we know that very well in English chess circles. My old friend Julian Hodgson used to play it to great effect. So e3 and c5. So really going for it. Of course, you don't have to lash out with c5, but well, you can get away with this move. And Nakamura decides to damage black's pawn structure, and then goes knight c3. So you can see immediately the problem with black's structure is that with this pawn moved away, then you can no longer protect that pawn from e6. So this is the big theme in this game, actually, the weakness of the d5 pawn. Bishop e6, okay, solidly protecting the pawn. And now knight e2, tricky move. So not knight f3, because from f3, well, the knight isn't really going anywhere. But from e2, well, it might still end up on d4, but it has the option to go to f4 to put more pressure on d5, and also looking at that bishop on e6. So tricky stuff already. Knight c6. And now queen d2. Nakamura's actually played like this before. And this is quite a clever little move. It's almost like a waiting move. You know, black has to think, well, is that king going to the queen side? Or what exactly is white intending to do? Is this knight going to come here or here? Or maybe it's not going to move at all. Maybe this pawn is going to come to g3 and then bishop g2. So it's just waiting to see how black reacts. And actually, I think this induced the first mistake from his opponent. Black played c4. And that just takes all the pressure off d4. I mean, this is a very ambitious move. Of course, if black could get this kind of pawn storm going, then he could be happy. But that's a long shot. In the meantime, there's action in the centre. So a3, well, that stops this potentially annoying pin. And a6, so black seems to be intent on going for b5. And now g3. So yes, this is the problem for black, that the bishop reaches the long diagonal and there's pressure on the pawn on d5. So knight e7, and that's why, of course, the bishop went to d6, because it might be possible just to eliminate that knight when it comes to f4. But Nakamura seizes the opportunity to just break straight away. So you can see the problem with bypassing with the pawn move c4, because now there's no pressure on the d4 pawn. So white can get away with this. And that bishop looks really strong on the long diagonal. Bishop c7. Now it is possible to make lots of exchanges on d5, but Nakamura obviously felt that that would simplify the position too much and decided instead just to castle. So he's keeping the tension. I think that's a very good idea. He decided to take on d5 now, but not to exchange, but to bypass with knight e4. And he perhaps is looking to hop into c5. That could be a very nice square. Bishop a5. So that sort of induces c3. So perhaps he didn't want the knight to come to c3, the next knight to come to c3. But somehow the bishop looks a bit odd on a5. f5 pushes the knight. Looks very risky. I think the knight happily sits on c5, looking at these two pawns. Well, this pawn on b7, and yeah, that was an interesting slip. The bishop on e6, not a pawn, but it feels like a big pawn. In any case, b6, and Nakamura decided to exchange. Well, that bishop wasn't a beautiful piece, but having exchanged it off, then Nakamura can target that pawn on e6. This bishop on g2 doesn't have an opponent, so it looks very nice. This bishop is really offside, looks dreadful. So in fact, this is a very simple position for white to play. So typical of Hikaru, plays very pragmatically, very simply, and he has beautiful initiative, and he is absolutely deadly with the initiative. Okay, that rook would like to come into play somewhere. Now this is a slightly surprising move. You could play knight f4, just to exchange off those knights, and I think white has a huge advantage. But bishop takes knight, and it's an excellent decision actually. So clearly queen takes will run into knight f4, hitting the queen, and then e6 drops. So takes, knight f4. Now look at these squares. Really weak. Knight e6 threatened. You can see, yeah, this pawn has been dragged all the way from f7. And the king is open. It's a dreadful position. Rook f6. And now, well, as I say on many occasions, split rooks. You compare how white's rooks coordinate compared to black's. So these rooks control the open file. There's a threat to play rook e8 straight away. And white dominates in a really simple way. So in effect, these rooks are just completely shut out of the game. So there's a threat to check on h5. g6 prevents that. And now, simple winning idea. Rook e8 hits the queen. Queen c7. Now, okay. I'll give you a moment to have a quick look at it. I'm not going to have a think and drink moment. This is too simple. Way too simple. Knight takes d5. And black resigned. So you can see there's a knight fork. And if rook takes knight, well, we don't even need to pick up the queen. We can actually deliver checkmate. A very simple and very smooth victory by Hikaru Nakamura. But Nakamura's route into the candidates tournament, playing in these minor events, really begs the question. What happens when he hits strong opposition? He's very much an unknown quantity. Magnus Carlsen believes that he can still cut it. He named Nakamura and Caruana as the most likely to win the candidates. Reasonable prediction? Yes, Nakamura's constant online blitz keeps him tactically sharp. Yes, he will have had time to brush up on his opening theory. But the discipline of classical chess is just so different from blitz and rapid. There's no quick release of tension. There are practical decisions that need to be taken, but not in a split second. In other words, is Nakamura match fit? As a warm-up for the candidates, he played a short match against a Wonder Liang, comprising classical, rapid and blitz games. Typically, Nakamura decided to stream this online on his YouTube channel, I think on Twitch as well. So it's all about creating content. There's no secret training match like in the old days. It's all out in the open. It's fascinating. 2 classical games were drawn, good fights, and a Wonder Liang came out on top in the rapid and blitz. I mean, I don't know if this proves anything at all, apart from the fact that, well, Nakamura felt the need to get some practice in before the big event. I mean, other players have been doing this as well, and Caruana also played in St. Louis. Apart from the question of his match fitness, another question is Nakamura sufficiently motivated? Now, that might seem a very strange question. Surely he must be if he's simply decided to play. But here's my point. Nakamura doesn't need the money. His profile online couldn't be higher, couldn't be bigger. Now that he has a family life, he has other matters on his mind. And trust me, it has a big effect. At some point in the tournament, he will hit difficulties. And at that moment, we'll find out whether he has the grit to pull through. That's what I mean by motivation. The staying power, the stamina. At 38, he's the oldest in the tournament by some way. The last classical tournament of note that Nakamura played was Norway Chess in June 2025. So that's quite some time ago. And he did play well, scoring +1. And here is how he defeated Fabiano Caruana. Caruana playing white. And we're at move 65, so well after the first time control, and they're basically playing on the increment, or at least Caruana. I seem to remember Caruana was running short of time at this moment, and Nakamura had just really started going through the gears, playing so fluently, so quickly, and Nakamura is deadly when he gets in that kind of situation. Basically, black cannot lose this position. And you can see that there are a few targets. This king is creeping up the board. It would like to step in. Of course, the bishop is in the way. But, these are potentially targets. Still should be a draw. In fact, white can just wait with the king here. So, for example, king f2. Knight e4 check, and then you can take with the knight and play bishop c4, and actually there's no harm done. There's still a target on e6. Of course, white can still wait, black can still wait around in this position and try a few tricks and traps, because essentially white is very passive there. But instead of waiting with the king, Fabiano played knight a4, and Hikaru seized his moment with knight e4, attacking the pawn on g3. That knight has to be eliminated, and now knight c3. So Fabiano must have thought, okay, I'm holding this one because the entry squares are covered, the king can't get in. Okay, so I think we need to have a think and drink moment. It's about time. So if you were playing black, how would you play in this position? How did Hikaru break into Fabiano's position? Cheers. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons, where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. Hikaru played knight f5, attacking both these pawns. That was defended. Now, here is the subtle move. I hope you found it. King b6, black waits. And this position is Zugzwang. I think I actually showed this game on the channel previously, so hopefully you remembered it, or hopefully you found it. So the king can't move because one of these pawns will drop. And if the knight moves, well, that's the only thing to do. Then the king is able to step forward to attack this pawn. Not just that, it can be defended for a moment. Well, again, it's another Zugzwang position. If knight takes pawn, then king takes b3. So knight b7, king takes. This is the game continuation. King c3, and black is able to attack this weak pawn on e3. And there is simply no defense here. Knight e3. This one doesn't matter at all, because this e pawn is going to go through. Knight b3 check. King c3. So if king takes knight, then king takes knight, and the pawn endgame is winning. So knight c5, knight f5, knight e6, and now king d2, and this e pawn just waltzes through to the queening square. That was a really nice squeeze from Nakamura. You know, from a certain moment in that game, you just felt he's going to do it. You know, you could see that the sort of life drain out of Caruana during the game, actually. In general, Hikaru has an excellent score against Fabiano Caruana. So in their classical games, 18 draws, 5 wins for Nakamura, just 1 win for Caruana. And sometimes Caruana has really bad days against him. Feels like Naka has a psychological edge in their games. So perhaps you remember this one from the last candidates tournament in Toronto in 2024. Here's the finish. Let's just get this one on the board. So Nakamura was white and didn't seem to get much out of the opening. This was played in round 8. Nakamura white, Caruana black. At this moment, black's position looks pretty solid. You know, it's nice that this bishop potentially has a square on d5. Black should double on the e-file. But instead, queen g5 from Caruana. So he started chasing a queen exchange. But, okay, rook e3. Knight f4. And I suspect that Caruana had underestimated this move, h4. If this is taken, rook e4, so because of the threat here, then that provokes g5. Actually, although black is the pawn up, it's a dreadful position because the queen is offside. All white's pieces are very well placed. The king is exposed. And at some point, white is going to be able to play, let's say, bishop d1 and knight h5 to pick off this, well, get the pawn back, and has a really, really strong attack. So after h4, queen d5 played, rook e4, the knight retreated, rook e1, so simple doubling on the e-file. Knight retreated, rook e5, the queen was pushed back, h5, the knight has been pushed right back. Very dangerous that white controls this diagonal. Bishop d7, rook exchange, and knight f5. Oh, this is so strong. So look at all white's pieces playing. Black's pieces, they're all in the back rank. And what a transformation from a few moves ago. It felt like Caruana just kind of lost confidence at some moment. And Queen b4 was really strong, attacking b7 and then a final blunder. Check. And knight d5. Here Caruana resigned because the knight attacks the queen. And if pawn takes, queen takes knight is checkmate. Told you it was important to control that diagonal. I'm in an absolute crush. Hikaru Nakamura came close in the 2024 candidates tournament. He was equal second. But now he's older and even further away from regular classical games. He has the ability, there's no doubt about that. But is that all in the past? Remember, I'll be posting recap videos on all the rounds, after all the rounds. So do subscribe to the channel if you want to get instant notifications for when I post a video. And if you want to support the channel and get extra content, then do check out my Patreon page. By the way, the next live masterclass, exclusively for patrons, will take place this Friday the 27th of March. And I'll be looking at what I think is one of the games of the year. It's going to be a real treat for you. So I'm looking forward to that. And of course, I look forward to the candidates starting this Sunday, March the 29th.